Hey, so this is Flash, Acting 5, Lip Sync, Dialogue, and Gestures. Alright, so in this file, hopefully you saved your file from last class with the lip sync and any facial animation that you've done. Go inside your character. You'll already have your head in your file. So turn on all the body parts except for leave the lower body off, just so you have what we see here. Once you've turned those body parts on, go to your character, comp, and shrink it down so that you have just the upper body showing, just like I have here. So this is a medium shot. So what I suggest you do is after you have them shrunk down and the accents deleted on the head, it's great that we have the lip sync already in the facial animation, but just a note that normally we do lip sync first, and then we animate the body, and then we animate the face, the facial animation, so being the eyebrows and eyes and blinks and all that stuff. So that's usually the usual workflow, but since we did lip sync in the last class, I thought it'd be silly just to animate the same lip sync twice, so that's why I asked you to keep your file. We're going to animate some body gestures just with the upper body, arms and torso. We're going to do it on the pronounced vowels. We're going to talk a little bit about acting choices and some cliche gestures to avoid, and the importance of hands in acting. Characters use their hands a lot. It really helps to convey the idea. And then we're also going to talk about how in Flash we can antic, speed into a move, go to an extreme in one or two frames, and then overshoot and settle. We've done a lot of this already in previous classes, where we anticipate, quickly go into a move, and then either overshoot the move and settle, or we slow into the move. So it's the antic on one side and either the overshoot or settle on the other side of the move that kind of hides the popping, right? And then of course we're going to go over some animation principles as we block this animation out. You'll see here over on the side, I have some storyboards in my file. Because you're using your file from last class, you won't have them in your file, but at this point when we're starting to animate gestures, we're starting to do some acting, you want to come up with some sort of plan. As you listen to your dialogue, you want to think about how the character is going to move, what poses they're going to get into. If you can keep that in your head, great. As you become more of an experienced animator, you will be able to actually plan that in your mind. But if you don't feel you can do that, we have some storyboards on the website that you can download and import them into your Flash file and put them on a layer. You can bring them into your library and drag them onto a layer with the layer selected. If you're going to bring the storyboards in, I suggest you do it in this layer, in this level of the symbols where we have all the characters' parts and pieces, because this is where you're going to be animating your character. And you can see in my file here I created a storyboards layer at the bottom, and I have a board drawings layer. So you create a new layer over top of the storyboard so that you can do your drawings on top. It's helpful if you have a tablet for this, so you can draw. It's kind of hard to draw with the mouse, but you don't have to do it in your Flash file. You can also download the storyboard we have on the website. You can print them out, hand draw your poses. Even if you don't feel you're a very skilled drawer, you can just use stick figures. You want to show the body pose, refer back to the mood and posture class that we had with the C curves and the S curves. So really you just want to draw in a circle for the head, draw the line of action for the body, and then pencil in the arm and legs positions. At the bottom here, you can see in my storyboard is action and dial. Dial is short for dialogue. So really you can just write in the dialogue here and then pencil in the general pose for how he's posing on those words. And again, this is just very rough. It's just a rough plan so that when you go to start animating, you know where you're going to go with it and what poses you're going to set at what dialogue. First thing I want to talk about before we actually start posing our character is a couple of cliche poses to avoid. Put the hand out like this and the finger straight up. That's so overused. I don't ever want to see anything like that. Another pose to really avoid is anything that involves twinning, where the arms or the legs, the extremities are the same on both sides. You just never want to have a twinned pose like that, where it's the same on both sides. It's just really boring and stiff and just looks very unnatural. It's good to avoid that too as well, just that characters are just holding one hand out. But sometimes it really does work, especially in series animation. And you see it in feature as well. You really want to try and be creative with your poses. So that's part of making good acting choices. So when we're talking about making good acting choices, we're really talking about two things: the timing of the movement of your character, and it's also the posing. Being really creative with your posing is something that you really want to focus on. Just get the best poses. Think about how you would say things and how your arms would move. Watch people. Pay attention to how people move when they talk. People almost never go into those cliche cartoon poses. But remember to keep your poses silhouetted for good staging. The pose is clear to the viewer and it's conveyed over well. With timing, we want to get a variation of timing, so we want a good contrast between fast and slow movements. In Flash, that's easy because we won't be snap into poses often to hide any kind of flipping. So it's usually a pretty snappy style that Flash lends itself to, and also Toon Boom as well. Any kind of 2D animation software usually lends itself to pretty snappy timing. Another thing to remember is that if you're going to move into an action quick, that calls for an overshoot, because the momentum of the character moving quickly causes them to continue moving forward and then settle. And if a character goes into a movement slowly, usually they'll settle. Usually. Those are just general guidelines to remember. Alright, so let's, having said all that, let's just go in and start blocking this character out. Again, you can bring your storyboard in if you like, or just print it out and have your rough plan on the side. So here's one I've done earlier. I had the lip sync and the facial animation already in there.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Alright, so there's not much accenting, it's mostly posing. So the good part is kind of an accent, but I did move the entire upper body. So our three main poses here are 1, 2. This is sort of an accent because it's the same pose, just modified a little bit with a small movement. And then the third big pose is here. Let's start blocking out our character. So we're going to double click to get inside. So same with the lip sync. I'm going to set a key as a placeholder just to know where I want the extreme pose to be at. The I in signed, that's the vowel of that word. So I'm going to pose right on the I in signed. And I'm going to err on the side of before the I actually happens. We hear the I at 17, so I'm going to go to 16, and let's key everything here. Let's key the whole body. So that's where he's going to hit his extreme pose. Now I'm going to go back and set the anticipation pose. So he can go into that pose pretty quick, so maybe in 2 frames. I'll set a key, and then he's going to go into the anticipation in, let's give it, an anticipation can run a little longer, so maybe 4 or 5 frames. Let's give him 5. Alright, so let's get him into his anticipation pose. Now I'm going to get him into a pose with his arms out. Again, you can plan out your own movements, so you don't have to follow mine exactly. So I know that he's gonna shoot up with his arms out, so I'm going to bring him down first. We're going to anticipate and move him in the opposite direction. So we'll just grab his whole body. I'm going to move the pivot down to his hips and just rotate him down a little. Maybe move his head down a bit, because his head's probably going to go back on the next pose, so we want to do the opposite of move him in the opposite direction first. Again, his arms are going to come out, so I'm going to move this arm in a little. And you can see that as I'm posing, the lines are coming apart. So as you're going, you can go back and fix it all later, but I always like to just sort of get the lines together as I'm posing, so I don't have to go back. Okay, so let's see what we got. I'm going to scrub over this. And we could even give him a bit of a squash down. Squash him for the anticipation. And one thing you can do, as long as you set a key afterwards, you can skew him a little bit too. This is why I sort of animate backwards a little bit when I'm blocking. I'll put that time marker on for where I want him to hit his extreme pose, and then I go back to do that so that when I'm setting my anticipation pose, I've already set the next row of keys, so he's going to pop back into his regular proportions without any skewing or squashing. It's just a little technique that I do. I'm sure other people do it as well. So we have his anticipation. That's going to happen over 5 frames, and then in 2 frames he's going to pop out into his big pose on signed. All right, so let's set that pose now. So if you want to turn your onion skinning on, you can. Let's see. Sometimes it confuses matters, but this will be helpful. All right, so he's going to go into this pose on signed. So as I mentioned, I want him to go into a pose with his arms outstretched. You can foreshorten these arms a little bit if you need to. So say this arm is pointing toward us a little bit, toward the viewer. It's going to be a little bit shorter, and you can even fatten it out a little bit. Long as the lines don't get messed up over here, they're still connecting. Hands are extremely important in animation. It helps to express. Some people use their hands more than others, but everybody uses their hands when they talk. Almost everybody, especially someone who's speaking with a lot of emotion, and that's why it's important in Flash to have a lot of hands, a lot of hand shapes and poses. So we're going to switch out this hand as well. These aren't twinned. It has a nice S-curve to it. You want to pay attention to that in your posing. So let's just play that.
Everyone sign?
Okay. Okay, so the next pose we want to hit is the E and yes. I think for good, we'll just accent. Scrub till you hear the E and yes. So around frame 39. Again, we're blocking so we can adjust this later. Set a row of keyframes right on the E and yes. And then he can go into this new pose in 2 frames. We'll set a key again. We want him to go into his poses quickly, and then the anticipations can be over more in between, so more frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll give the anticipation a few frames. So we'll go back on the timeline a little bit. This is going to be our anticipation, and then going into our major pose on yes. So let's set our anticipation pose, which is the row in the center here. For the next pose, I'm just going to have him straighten out a little bit, or maybe lean forward, like I did in my example. His line of action will just be something like this. It'll be straight. To anticipate that movement, we're just going to move him down a tiny bit. If you want to, you can go ahead and do your extreme movement first, and then do the anticipation in between. And because he's going to put his arms back down at his sides, his arms are going to move down. I'm actually going to move his arms up a little bit to anticipate that action. And then what we can do also too here, I know this is an anticipation pose. I'm just going to shut the ends getting off for a minute. He's going to move down and then lean forward. So you can take it 2 different ways. You can anticipate the head down and then bring it back up again. Or you can move it back more to give it a feeling of weight, like it's heavy. So I'm going to go with that option for now. And then we're going to go into our extreme here. Okay, so I'm going to just make some adjustments to this. So we have this movement on yes. I'm going to anticipate him down a lot lower. I want to overshoot this a little bit. So let's move him down quite a bit. We're going to give him more of a squash here. Just pretty subtle. And then I'm going to squash the head a little bit more. And then on the yes, on the E and yes, we're going to stretch the head. So we're going to overshoot that a little bit. Before I do that, I'm going to set another key down the timeline. Not going backwards this time, I'm going forward down the timeline to the right. Set another key, and just so that, because we're going to overshoot that on the, we're going to overshoot this on the pose previous. So right when he hits yes, we're going to overshoot this one, and then he's going to settle. That's why I set the key so that it's already settled, and it's going to stick there. So let's go to our extreme pose here, and let's overshoot. Stretch it and squash it a bit, maybe his head, and then get his whole body. Obviously move the pivot point to the bottom. So we can stretch it, and let's skew it a little bit to the left, just to overshoot that. So there's the overshoot, there's the settle. Let's just play and see how that looks blocked.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On with.
Okay, so let's just do for the next one on good. Okay, so I'm going to move him back a little bit on good. We've gotten him into 2 major poses. Now we're just going to do an accent. Right on good. But let's go a frame before that. And we'll just give it 2 frames. So for good, we're just going to have him do this. We'll just have him move his head a little bit. But just to avoid the body being so stagnant, we'll move it just a tiny bit. So just a very slight amount. And we'll do the same thing with the joints. We'll just bend the joints a little bit. Okay, let's play the whole thing and check it out again.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Alright. Alright, now he's going to anticipate for on we go. And he's really going to go into his extreme pose on the most pronounced word, but you want to hit the vowel on that word. So on, he yells on. So right on frame 80. So let's go to frame 79, the frame before that, and set a key. That's where he's going to go into his most extreme pose. But let's go back down the timeline 2 frames. We'll give him 2 frames to get into that extreme pose, set a key. And that'll be the anticipation pose. And we'll give him 5 frames to get into that anticipation pose. So we'll go set another key. Alright, so this is going to be the anticipation pose here in the middle, the extreme pose, and then he's going to overshoot. That's going to overshoot. This extreme pose is going to be an overshoot, and then it's going to settle. So let's set the anticipation pose first. If you want to, you can do the extreme pose and then do the anticipation so you can see what he should anticipate into. But I have a pretty good idea that he's going to be out with his arms. I'm going to have him, just like my example, I'll have him something like this. So I know he's going to anticipate something like that. Let's see if I can improve on that a little bit. I'm not worrying about the facial animation. I'm just going to animate how I think the body should go, and then I'll worry about the facial later. And just really roughly here, just do things really quick, and then we'll just make sure the lines don't break. You know, just want to have a nice impression of what the pose is going to look like, and then we'll go through and just fix everything up. Alright, so we have this elbow issue here going on. So what we could do is let's just change this arm, see what we have here. I think that one may work. And we're going to have to change the elbow as well. We need an arm with an elbow. So we have a few forearms in here we can choose from. Okay, so we're going to want something like that has the rounded line at the bottom. Yeah, that's going to work. But we don't want this elbow line. Double click to get inside here. And we're just going to create a blank keyframe at the end here. So a blank keyframe, and we're going to just take one of these elbows. Let's just take this one. And we'll copy it. Copy frame, we'll paste it at the end where we put a blank keyframe. And now let's just go in here. We're just getting what we need. Get rid of that line. And that's going to be, we just made a new arm here. That's on frame 8. So we'll double click to get back out. And we'll click on this symbol for the forearm and change it to 8. That's the one we just made. So we'll put it here. So this pose will work for anticipation pose. Let's turn your onion skinning back on again. We can see our antic. And now let's get him to shoot straight forward for this extreme pose. We're going to get him shooting forward, and we're going to get his arm pointing as straight as we can, but we don't want to go too far to the left. I'm going to keep him in frame a little bit for good staging. Anticipation, extreme, and we're going to overshoot this extreme and then settle. So let's set the next pose. So I'm going to go about 6 frames down the timeline. Instead of new keys, this will be the settle, and he'll be in this exact pose here. So we'll go back to the extreme and we'll overshoot the extreme. So we can overshoot the arm separately, just like we did in the arm point in the earlier exercise. So if you're going to stretch it a little bit, you're going to have to squash it a little bit. I can see the line breaking there. I'm just not going to worry about that right now. So we'll overshoot the head forward a little bit, and really we can overshoot the entire body over a little bit. I'm just going to shift arrow key that over maybe once. So there's the overshoot, and then settle. Let's move the arm a little bit for this overshoot as well. Not too much, just a little. This arm is just coming along for the ride, so it's not really part of the main action. Now let's actually skew him a little bit. And that'll just help. You don't want to do it too much. Alright, so let's play the whole thing. We got most of our poses put in, or all of our main poses put in.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay. Okay, so I just noticed that our storyboard layer is going way past what we needed to, so we'll just remove these keys, remove these frames. Remove frames, there we go. Alright, so let's go through our poses here. So let's ease into this pose. So let's go to the end, let's go to the extreme here, and just go we can do about 5 or 6 frames down the timeline. We'll set another key. As we can see, he moves up with his arms out, head goes back. So let's just go to the extreme right after the anticipation. We'll go to this extreme pose, and we can just move everything down a little bit. So we have that going on. And we'll also go back to that extreme pose. Let's also move him down just a little. From the extreme to the settle. He just moves a tiny bit. Okay, so this accent, we can cushion out of that as well. So let's go about 4 or 5 frames down again and set a key. I can move the extreme pose in toward the other this pose a little closer. If I adjust this pose, this new row of keys that we set, I'll have to copy it over here. I'll have to copy it here because otherwise it'll pop when it gets to here. But I'm going to do that because I don't want to. I want this to move as much as it does. I already have it. So let's just, and it's worth it. So we'll just move it a tiny bit, and we'll just get the whole body a little bit so it's not so stagnant. Because we move this frame, this pose, when we get to this next row of keys, it's going to pop back to where it was. So we're just going to copy that over. And is Flash going to give us that extra row of needless keys? Probably. Yep, it did. So let's just remove that, clear keyframe. Okay. And now we'll scrub over this last move. Anticipate, overshoot, settle. Let's go ahead and tween all of these key poses. And let's see what we end up with here.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay, so check out our first move.
Everyone sign?
Cushion works nice, but we have a breakage in the arm because we swapped the hand, so the hand now flips. So let's just select the hand. We'll have to put a keyframe in the middle, right on our tween. We can take the hand before or after that new keyframe. Let's just copy this hand, the new hand, to the new key. So we'll just copy frames, paste frames. We could also have just changed it in the properties. All right, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's give that new keyframe right where we switch the hand. Let's give it a bit of overlap. So we'll overlap the hand a little. It's not really overlapping, it's more of a drag. It's dragging. Hands dragging back gives us a feeling of weight. And there's a nice arcing motion too, as you can see. The arm moves up in a nice arcing motion. And it eases. Okay, so let's watch that move again.
Everyone sign?
Okay, so let's use Flash's ease function. Select the entire row of in-betweens here, and let's set ease to 100. And we can even drag this last row of keys out a little bit. Let's go out 2 more frames. And that will give us a better cushion on that move.
Everyone sign?
I know the facial, we'll worry about the facial after. And you have to go back to frame 1 most of the time.
Everyone sign? Yes.
Okay, so that last, the second move is actually not too bad. I'm just going to cushion it a little bit better. So we go from the anticipation to the overshoot in 2 frames, and then we settle. Settling in 3 frames. Let's give it a little more than 3 frames. Let's just increase it to by about 2 frames. And select the whole row of in-betweens. And let's go to the properties and increase the ease to 100. And let's just see how that looks.
Everyone sign? Yes.
And dragging the head back, remember we dragged the head back on the anticipation, that seems to have worked out.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
I'm just noticing the arms, when this character overshoots, the arms could go in a little bit. From the anticipation to the overshoot, because when you go from the overshoot to the settle, the arms are pretty still. So let's go to this overshoot and let's just move the arms in a little bit more. It'll keep the character from being so rigid looking during that movement. I know it seems like a fairly small change, but sometimes these small changes make a big difference in the overall performance of the character. So you can see as we drag over it, you can see those paying attention to the arms now. There's a bit of movement on there, it's not so stiff.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay, so I'm just going to actually try a little thing here. I'm just going to give the head a little bit of drag. So I'm going to go right in the middle of these two keyframes. From the overshoot to the settle. I'm going to place a key right in the middle. And just drag the head back forward a little bit. So we have it move forward a little bit here, and then on the settle, I'm going to bring it back. And I'll bring that key on the head out a little bit just to offset the head from the body. Let's just play that and see how it looks.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good.
That looks okay. But now we'll have this head's going to pop when it gets to this frame, so I'll have to copy this head. Copy, paste, and then it got rid of our tween, so let's put the tween back. Alright, so this third move is just an accent on good. Let's watch it.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay. You know what, that's fine for now. Let's just select the entire row and use Flash's ease. I'm going to offset the arms, just a frame or two. Please feel free to go through and offset body parts as long as they don't come away from the body and it's looking okay. Everything moving at the same time is not good, so you want to have things offset. You can even set another row of keys and just move the arm. So I'll do it that way. I'll set another row of keys here, for example, for offsetting things. And the arms were going in. So what I'll do is I'll just select the arm here and move it in a bit. So it'll continue after the rest of the body's stopped. And it's always good to put some offset in classic tween. So let's ease that a little bit. And scrub over it. Okay, let's play.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay. So there's a bit of offset on the arm there for good. And then on we go. Okay, so we have a bunch of problems here, which we can fix very quickly. But before I start fixing all of these joints, I just want to check out the timing first.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just ease this a little bit better. I'll increase the ease on between the overshoot and the settle. Select the whole row of in-betweens and ease that to 100. I'm going to offset that back arm. Drag it way out. And what we could do is set a key here, and we'll break the arm for a little overlap or a little bit of drag. And then ease these as well.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Let's just keep that a little more subtle. Okay, so just a little offset on the arm. Now let's fix these joints. This is why we get into our major poses in a frame or two, so that we don't have a lot to fix in the middle, and it's a nice snappy look too.
Everyone sign?
Okay, so from start pose to our anticipation pose, we have a few problems here. Okay, so we'll set a key at the first frame that we see a problem, and we'll bring it back. I think the arm switches here. Yeah, it does. Okay. So this is what we basically do in Flash: is we set two keys in the center where there's a problem, and then we copy the outer keys to the center. That's what we've done before. So we'll copy and paste key on the left to the center, and then the keyframe on the right to the center. Go to both those keyframes and adjust them. Okay, I'm just going to turn the audio off so I don't hear the audio while I'm scrubbing over this. Okay, so let's go to the forearm now. We'll do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and set two keys first, and then I'll copy and paste, and then go to the other side for the anticipation pose and copy that and paste it to the center. Now let's just fix these. And at this point we should be making sure the lines aren't breaking and the hand is arcing nicely, or the arm is arcing nicely. Right now we're working on the arm. Okay, so let's do the hand now. We'll do the same thing for the hand. We'll set 2 keys in the center here. We'll copy the outer one on the left to the middle. And the anticipation hand, copy, and we'll paste it in the middle. And now we'll just fix those 2. So we probably be a good opportunity to get some drag on the hand here as it starts to rise. And then we'll do the same thing here for the fist. Now remember, we're swapping a hand here, so we want to swap it at the fastest point, which is probably going to be the center. We don't really see the change in hands, so that'll work out. Doing it right in the middle works out best. Let's have a look at this here. Let's just scrub over it. Looking at the right arm here, going from his original pose into the anticipation pose. So that's working out now, nothing's breaking. From the anticipation now to the extreme, and we're going to have to do some repairing here. I think it's the torso, so let's actually go to the torso, select it, we'll set a key in the middle, and bring the torso back to match the collar. There, so it's okay now. Now let's just fix this arm. The shoulder's okay, it's mainly the forearm and the hand, so we'll set a key on the forearm and the hand in between the anticipation and the extreme. Right here, set a key in the middle, and then we can just grab them both and move them over. Make sure that elbow lines aren't breaking. Okay, so that's working out. From here to here, anticipation to extreme on this arm. Now let's look at this arm. Yeah, the shoulder needs to be fixed. So let's go to the shoulder, select it, set a key in the middle. Scrubbing over again just to check it. It should come down here. Scrub over again. So now we'll fix the forearm. Now the hand, and again a good opportunity to add some drag here. I just skewed that a little bit. Okay, and then the settle is okay. I know that pit's breaking. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Alright, so let's watch our whole thing here. Let's turn our audio back on.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
I encourage you to tweak yours further and get it as perfect as you can. But I notice now the lip sync is off.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Okay, the lip sync's off because we slid keys around. We slid the head keys around as we were making adjustments. So we're going to go to each frame of the head, check the number, the frame number that it's on, select the head symbol, and then look in the properties and make sure that it's on. Well, they'll all be on play once, but make sure that under first it says the same number as it does as the frame for each frame that the head is on. Now if we play it.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Alright, so the lip sync's on and the facial animation pretty much lines up with the action.
Everyone sign? Yes. Good. On we go.
Alright, so this is good for now. So make sure that your arms are arcing nicely. You have some drag. If arms are being raised or being dropped, that you drag the elbows and wrists. Anticipate nicely. You can use a little bit of skewing. Just really think about all the animation principles as you're now starting to put them together into a character's performance. Anticipations, overshoots, stretches and squashes, and settles, easing out of poses and cushioning. All those have to be implemented at appropriate times in your animation. Alright, so this is the end of the acting section. Next is the advanced dialogue. We're going to be first doing a monologue sequence with one character, entire body. We're going to block and refine that, and then we're going to move on to a 2-character sequence where we're going to be focusing on action and reaction. See you in the next class.